5 years ago, really almost 6 years ago now, I was watching the 2019 NBA Draft Lottery, begging and pleading for the basketball gods to hand the Bulls the #1 pick and a chance to get one of the biggest prospects since LeBron James, a franchise-changing player, a future superstar the Bulls desperately needed after 2 seasons of tanking. And while the previous tanking season netted the Bulls the #7 pick and Wendell Carter Jr., in that season the Bulls were especially bad, having won just 22 games and finishing with the 4th worst record in the NBA, giving them higher odds to land a top 3 pick, which the 2019 class was being touted as a top 3 deep draft class with the likes of Zion, Ja Morant, and RJ Barrett. Unfortunately though for the Bulls, they would get unlucky once again as 3 teams would jump them in the lottery, those teams being the Lakers, the Grizzlies, and the Pelicans. And wouldn't you know it, the Bulls would land the #7 pick in the draft for the 3rd straight season, which they would eventually use to select Coby White. But as the seasons went on, missing out on Zion didn't look that bad after all, as Zion would miss most of his rookie season, would miss his 3rd season entirely, and would continue to battle injuries and conditioning throughout his early career. So much so that to this day, despite this being his 6th season in the league, Zion has only played in 190 games, while most players from the 2021 draft, guys who were drafted 2 years after Zion, have already played in more games than he has. And as Zion currently sits out with this most recent injury with no timetable for his return, and the Pelicans currently sitting with the worst record in the league, being riddled with injuries to some of their other key players, the Pelicans, who once thought they landed their next franchise player after losing the previous one in Anthony Davis, are now at a crossroads where they have an important decision to make. Hold out longer and see if the once high school and college phenom can turn it around and continue to build around him given he's still young, or cut their losses and look to move him in a trade. And while there has been a lot talked about in various media outlets on what's next for the future of the Pelicans and Zion Williamson, the Bulls have come up here and there as being a potential team to go after Zion Williamson. And to that I reply, why? Why would this make at all sense for either side? And would the Bulls actually pull the trigger on a potential deal to acquire Zion Williamson should the Pelicans make him available? So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Before I continue on with the video, you know we've got to give a big shout out over to our sponsors at PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action with player props. They've made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, whether you're a passive fan or a diehard. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. With basketball season heading into the new year, PrizePicks is the best place to get real money action while you follow along watching the game. For me, PrizePicks really makes the game that much more fun, although some of the guys like Coby White have not been doing so well for me. Think I need to just stick with what's consistent, like Nikola Vucevic hitting on his player props. But either way, you can make your picks in seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. So download the app and use the code BULLSCENTRAL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. What's crazy is you don't need to win to receive the $50. It is guaranteed. Again, use the promo code BULLCENTRAL. PrizePicks, run your game. Now, I do want to be clear. These rumors, reports, people talking about this topic on social media all came about after an article written by ESPN's Bobby Marks and Tim McMahon discussing the future of Zion, the uniqueness of his contract, and whether the Pelicans could look to trade him. And I want to be clear that while there were a lot of aggregators out there on Twitter stating that the Bulls were interested in Zion, or that there were current talks between the Bulls and the Pelicans of working out a deal that would send Zion to Chicago, if you actually read the article, it was purely all speculation from an anonymous GM, where they say a GM brainstorming potential Williamson deals mentioned the Bulls, who have been shopping Lavine, which we all know they have been, then went on to say, well, Lavine has his own durability issues, still has a lot of money left on his deal, but hey, he's having a much better season, to then further add, I bet Chicago would do that in a hypothetical deal built around swapping Zach and Zion. So nowhere did any source or GM claim that talks were actually happening, more so just brainstorming the type of deals that could work for trading for Zion Williamson, as the article leads into this saying, hey, the Pelicans might look to trade Zion, but are there actually realistic trade partners that could work? What's funny is right after this, they then added that said GM pondered the deal for a few seconds, the one in which they would swap Zach for Zion, and the GM said, yeah, he'd probably decline such an offer if he was running the Pelicans. So even whoever the hell this GM was had the quick foresight to say, yeah, this probably wouldn't make sense. Now, initially when I read that part, I was like, why the hell not? Where does he get off saying the Pelicans should decline such an offer? But as I thought about it more and more, it's not necessarily a shot at Zach Lavine, who's been balling out this season, because even if the Bulls said, yeah, we're down, we'll take Zion off your hands if you take Zach, what benefit is that for the New Orleans Pelicans? Like, if the Pelicans do in fact trade Zion Williamson, and there's talk about them wanting to move Brandon Ingram and that being a priority player they want to trade, if they start with Zion and they plan to trade Ingram, by that point, you're tearing the whole thing down. You're trading CJ McCollum, you're trading DeJounte Murray, you're starting over and building fresh around potentially Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey based on how the season is trending for them. What good is it to have Zach Lavine at this point if you're trading these guys? I guess you could flip him to try and get more value, but seeing as how hard it's been for the Bulls to move him in general, you really think that they would take on that level of risk? So no, this type of trade wouldn't make sense for the Pelicans unless, of course, the Bulls threw in some draft capital like a first round pick, but then it's a disaster of a trade for the Bulls to be sending out more draft picks when they themselves are going down a rebuild and taking on yet another injury prone player on a max contract whose career might be over by the time he even gets to Chicago. And so as it relates to the Bulls, which again, this has all been speculation at this point, there hasn't been a concrete report of the Bulls actually showing interest in Zion, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if they were, because if there is anything we know about this front office and everything they have said over the offseason, the moves they've made, and their statements on media day, they're not interested in going down a long rebuilding path. They're looking to get younger but still remain competitive, and they're trying to thread this needle where they can pivot from where they were last season, going through this youth movement where they have younger but more established players who are NBA ready, and build that way to get the Bulls back to relevance. Zion Williamson, in a vacuum, and when healthy, is that player. He's 24, still young, fits the Bulls timeline, he's already a two-time All-Star, and he is a piece, in theory, you could build around for your future. I say in theory because this is all dependent on one big thing, and that's if he's healthy. When Zion is healthy, he's a force, and no one can deny that. But the man has been off the court more often than he's been on it. And yes, because Zion is young, technically hasn't even entered his prime yet, there is a chance that he could get healthy and have a very productive and prosperous career. It would be different if all these injuries were happening when he was 30. But here's the thing, if you're the Bulls, do you really want to bring in yet another injury-prone player with a history like his and take on his contract after you just spent months trying to get off of Zach Lavine's? Now, to be fair, there are crazy stipulations to Zion's contract where his contract is only guaranteed a certain amount depending on the number of games he plays, as well as a certain weigh-in requirement and BMI levels that enable the Pelicans to get out of his contract. Like, it's actually pretty wild when you read about the structure of his overall deal. But regardless, is that a risk the Bulls are even willing to take? And then because we know AK, he'll double down on this decision even if it backfires, and will try to keep making this new roster iteration work until it's too late. Like, that's what worries me most, is AK makes this move, it doesn't work out, but he just hangs on to Zion hoping he'll get healthy one day, kind of like what they did with Lonzo Ball. Now, I'll tell you who would like a player like Zion Williamson in a Bulls uniform: Jerry Reinsdorf. Because Zion, healthy or not, is a big name that puts his franchise in the spotlight, sells more tickets and merchandise, and more money in his pocket regardless of how the team actually performs. So yet another thing that worries me on how I can see this actually happening. But no, look, at the end of the day, I think what will save the Bulls in all of this is the New Orleans Pelicans, because they're not going to be interested in taking on Zach Lavine if they're going down a rebuild. It just doesn't make sense for them. And let's be real, while I have little faith in the Bulls front office, at the end of the day, I think they know taking on Zion is much too risky, given his health concerns, his perceived lack of work ethic, and let's be real, even when he is healthy, he is an all-star level talent. But he also is a pretty flawed star, or I guess I should say not as versatile as most superstars are in this league. Great inside, incredibly strong and great post-up player and finisher around the basket, great handles, but can't shoot and is an average defender. And to me, above everything else, when it comes to my hesitation with Zion, I just haven't really liked the vibes from this guy. Like, I feel like the man doesn't really care about basketball all that much. I don't like the attitude and the work ethic towards the game. I don't like the inconsistent effort he gives on the floor. Like, I want a guy who's gonna come in and be like Joakim Noah when he puts on a Bulls uniform. I want a hustler and someone who's going to give 100% every game no matter the circumstance, and that's just not Zion. It's almost like he's taken his incredible God-given talent for granted and feel like he just doesn't have to work as hard. I know I don't know the guy. I know that's just me purely speculating on what I've seen from him and his demeanor on and off the court, but that's just the vibe that I get from him. And if I'm honest, that's not someone I want on my team. Anyway, I think all this is kind of moot anyway, but thought I would share my thoughts on the matter. I would love to know what you guys think though. Let me know in the comments. As always, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.